A bully hit the new inmate in the cafeteria. Seconds later, he was crying on the floor. The punch landed on Marcus Chen in the middle of Ironwood State Penitentiary's cafeteria, knocking the tray from his hands and scattering food across the gray concrete floor. 200 inmates froze in place, some already reaching for their contraband phones to film the spectacle everyone expected. Another rookie getting broken by Donnie Tank Harrison on his first day. But something was deeply wrong with this scene. Marcus didn't scream. Didn't run. Didn't beg for mercy like the other 17 men Tank had beaten down over the past 8 months. Instead, the 34-year-old simply wiped the blood from his lip with the back of his hand, his dark eyes fixed on his attacker with an intensity that made some of the more experienced inmates instinctively step back. "You have exactly 48 hours, Marcus said quietly, his calm voice cutting through the tense silence like a blade. 48 hours before everything you've built here collapses. And Tank? I really hope you enjoy every second of that remaining time." Tank Harrison, 280 pounds of pure institutionalized violence and undisputed leader of D-Block for 3 years, felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood, a genuine shiver of uncertainty running down his spine. This skinny Asian guy, 160 pounds in a faded orange jumpsuit, showed not a hint of the fear he should be feeling. "You crazy or stupid?" Tank growled, his fists clenching again. "Nobody threatens me in my house. Nobody." Marcus slowly bent down, collecting pieces of his sandwich from the floor. His movements were precise, controlled, the kind of body discipline that comes from years of rigorous training. "Not a threat, Tank. Just a professional warning between, let's say, co-workers." The cafeteria erupted in confused murmurs. Co-workers? What the hell was the rookie talking about? Guard Williams, stationed near the entrance, didn't intervene. Nobody expected him to. At Ironwood, there was official law and there was real law, and Tank Harrison was the real law in D-Block. The guards had learned long ago it was easier to let Tank maintain order his own brutal way than deal with constant riots. Marcus Chen had arrived at Ironwood just 6 hours earlier, transferred from Greenfield Federal Prison after serving 2 years of a 15-year sentence for financial fraud. His file was too clean, almost suspiciously simple: former data analyst at a San Francisco tech company, no history of violence, no gang affiliations, first offense. But there was something in Marcus's eyes that told a completely different story. A story Tank was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know. "You know what I think?" Tank advanced again, his voice rising so everyone could hear. "I think you need a clearer lesson about how things work here." He grabbed Marcus by the collar, lifting him partially off the ground with raw strength. That's when Marcus did something unexpected. He smiled. Not a nervous or desperate smile, but a genuine, almost friendly smile, as if Tank had just done exactly what he was expecting. "Thank you," Marcus murmured, so quietly only Tank could hear. "I needed one more witness for the report. Unprovoked physical assault, excessive use of force, explicit threats. The prosecutor will love every second of this being filmed right now." Tank looked around, confused, until he noticed at least 5 contraband phones capturing everything from different angles. But why would that matter? Everyone here was a criminal. Nobody cared what happened inside these walls. "The phones don't worry me," Tank said, though his voice had lost some of its previous confidence. "You think anyone here will testify against me? Everyone here either owes me favors or is too scared to open their mouth." Marcus freed himself from the grip with a quick, precise movement that revealed martial arts training. "I don't need them to testify, Tank. I already have everything I need. By the way, how's your brother Chris? Still working at that warehouse in Newark? Apartment 4B on Maple Street, right?" The blood literally drained from Tank's face. He had kept any information about his family in absolute secrecy throughout his entire stay at Ironwood. His younger brother was the only person in the world he truly cared about, the only pure thing left from his life before prison. "How did you?" Tank stumbled over his words, his aggressive posture faltering for the first time. "I know many things, Donnie," Marcus said softly, using Tank's real name that nobody dared pronounce inside that prison. "I know about the contraband phones you sell for $500 each. I know about the drugs coming into C-Block every Thursday at 2 in the morning. I know about Guard Patterson and the $15,000 in his offshore account he can't explain. And I especially know about that little problem you had last August, when that 19-year-old kid fell down the stairs and ended up in a coma for 3 weeks." The cafeteria had gone completely silent. Even the guards seemed to be paying attention now, though they pretended to be busy with other things. Tank was shaking, not with anger, but with something far worse, genuine fear. "Who the hell are you?" Marcus returned to his seat, calmly organizing what remained of his meal. "Someone you really shouldn't have touched today. But hey, we're all just trying to survive in here, right? You make your choices, I make mine." He took a bite of his crushed sandwich, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just turned Tank's absolute power upside down in less than 5 minutes. If you're curious to discover how a simple data analyst obtained information that not even prison investigators possess, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because this story of revenge and justice in the shadows of the prison system is just beginning. Tank Harrison slowly backed away, but his eyes never left Marcus. For the first time in 3 years, he wasn't the predator. He was the prey. And as he returned to his table in the corner of the cafeteria, surrounded by his men who looked at him with a mixture of confusion and growing concern, Tank realized something terrifying. Those 48 hours Marcus had mentioned? The clock was already ticking. That night in D Block, Tank couldn't sleep. He lay on his bunk staring at the ceiling, replaying Marcus's words over and over in his mind. How did this nobody know about Chris? About Patterson? About the kid who fell? Tank Harrison hadn't always been a monster. 12 years ago, he was Donnie Harrison, a construction worker from Newark who made one catastrophically stupid decision, robbing a convenience store to pay for his mother's cancer treatment. The clerk had a gun. Tank didn't. But Tank was bigger, stronger, and in the struggle, the clerk died. Manslaughter, 25 years. At Ironwood, he learned quickly that showing weakness meant becoming a victim. So Donnie Harrison died, and Tank was born. He built his empire one brutal lesson at a time, until even the guards feared crossing him. But now this skinny analyst was threatening to tear it all down, and Tank couldn't understand how. The next morning, Marcus was escorted to his assigned job in the prison library. Tank watched from across the yard, flanked by his 4 top enforcers: Big Mike, a 300-pound former biker; Carlos, serving life for triple homicide; Deshaun, who'd killed his own father; and Razor, whose nickname spoke for itself. "We need to handle this," Big Mike grunted. "Guy's making you look weak, boss. People are talking." Tank knew Mike was right. In prison, reputation was currency, and his was hemorrhaging value with every hour that passed. Follow him. Find out who he talks to, what he does. There's gotta be something we can use. What Tank's crew discovered over the next 24 hours terrified them more than any of them wanted to admit. Marcus Chen spent his library shift organizing files with methodical precision, but several inmates noticed him paying particular attention to incident reports from the past 3 years. He made no effort to hide it. Guard Morrison, who supervised the library, didn't stop him. In fact, Morrison seemed almost deferential. Nervous. During lunch, Marcus sat alone again. But this time, 3 inmates approached him voluntarily. Tommy Lou, serving 8 years for hacking. James Spiderweb, a former investigative journalist doing time for contempt of court. And Sarah Chun, Marcus's cousin, who worked in the prison's administrative office. Tank's informant couldn't hear their conversation, but he saw Sarah sliding a manila folder across the table. Marcus reviewed the contents with no visible emotion, then nodded once. Sarah's face showed relief, almost gratitude. "They're related," Razor reported back to Tank. "The girl in admin? That's his cousin. She's been working here for 2 years." Tank felt his stomach drop. An inside connection. That explained some of it, but not everything. Not the offshore accounts. Not the details about Chris. That afternoon, Tank made his move. He cornered Spiderweb in the shower room, pressing him against the tile wall. "What did Chen want from you?" Spider, a wiry 50-year-old with gray hair and sharp eyes, didn't look afraid. He looked pitying. "Man, you have no idea what you stepped into, do you? Talk. Now." Marcus Chen isn't just some data analyst, Tank. Before his arrest, he worked for a company called Sentinel Analytics. You know what they did? They built predictive algorithms for federal law enforcement. FBI, DEA, even Homeland Security used their software to track criminal networks. Tank's grip loosened slightly. So what? He's a computer nerd. A computer nerd who has access to databases most cops don't even know exist, Spider continued. And here's the thing, Tank. His conviction? Financial fraud? That was a setup. He discovered his company was selling their software to private prisons to identify vulnerable inmates for forced labor programs. When he tried to expose it, they framed him for embezzling money. The pieces were starting to form a horrifying picture in Tank's mind. Marcus got himself transferred here specifically, Spider said quietly. Ironwood is one of the prisons in the network. And Tank, you've been their golden boy for 3 years. The model prisoner who keeps everyone else in line through fear, making the guards' jobs easier while the warden cuts costs and pockets the difference. Tank released Spider, stepping back. That's impossible. Nobody volunteers to come to Ironwood. Someone with a mission does. Someone with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Spider rubbed his throat where Tank had been pressing. That fall last August? The 19-year-old kid? His name was Daniel Reeves. He was scheduled to testify about the labor program before he accidentally fell down those stairs. His mother has been investigating his incident for 8 months. Guess who she hired? No. Sentinel Analytics. Or what's left of it. Marcus still has access to everything. Every financial transaction, every communication, every dirty secret in this entire prison system. And Tank? He's been building a case for 18 months. You hitting him yesterday? That wasn't bad luck. That was the final piece he needed. Tank felt physically ill. The 48 hours wasn't a threat. It was a timeline. Federal investigators are already on their way. They'll be here tomorrow morning with warrants for you, Patterson, Warden Brooks, and probably a dozen others. Marcus needed one more documented act of violence from you to prove the pattern of institutional corruption. You gave it to him in front of 200 witnesses. That evening, Tank tried to call his brother using his contraband phone. The line was disconnected. He tried Patterson's number. Straight to voicemail. He tried the warden's private line. Nothing. The rats were already abandoning the ship, and Tank was chained to the deck. In his cell, Marcus Chen reviewed the final documentation on his tablet, another piece of contraband, but one the guards had been specifically instructed not to confiscate. Every transaction, every assault, every cover-up, meticulously documented and cross-referenced with financial records showing exactly who profited from the suffering. His cellmate, an elderly forger named Eugene, watched him work. You really think they'll pay for what they did to you? To all of us. Marcus closed the tablet, his expression unreadable. Justice isn't about revenge, Eugene. It's about making sure they can't hurt anyone else. Daniel Reeves deserved better. So do the 43 other men who've been permanently injured or killed in accidents at Ironwood over the past 5 years. Outside his cell, Tank Harrison pressed his back against the cold concrete wall, finally understanding that the countdown wasn't to an attack or an escape. It was to accountability. And for the first time in 12 years, Donnie Harrison remembered what it felt like to be powerless. The next morning arrived with suffocating tension. Tank hadn't slept. Every sound in the night felt like federal agents coming through the doors. But dawn broke quietly, and the prison routine continued as if nothing had changed. Except everything had changed. During breakfast, Marcus sat at his usual isolated table, but this time he wasn't alone. Tommy Lou, the hacker, joined him. Then Spiderweb. Then 3 more inmates Tank didn't recognize, all transferred to Ironwood within the past 6 months. Tank watched from across the cafeteria, his food untouched. Big Mike leaned in close. Boss, we can still handle this. Say the word, and Chen disappears. Accidents happen all the time. And prove everything he's been saying? Tank snapped. You think the feds won't notice if their key witness gets shanked the day before they arrive? Use your head, Mike. But desperation was overtaking logic. Tank's empire, built so carefully over 3 years, was crumbling, and he could feel his men sensing weakness like sharks smelling blood in the water. At 10 a.m., Warden Richard Brooks summoned Tank to his office. It was the first time in 18 months they'd spoken face-to-face. The warden's office smelled of expensive cigars and leather, a jarring contrast to the antiseptic prison smell. Brooks looked 20 years older than his age, his face gray with stress. We have a situation, Harrison. You think? Tank couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. Guard Patterson disappeared last night. Cleaned out his apartment, left town. I've received communication from the Federal Bureau of Prisons that investigators will be conducting a surprise inspection tomorrow morning. Brooks poured himself a whiskey despite the early hour. They mentioned your name specifically. And mine. Tank leaned forward. What does Chen really want? There's got to be a way to negotiate. Negotiate? Brooks laughed bitterly. This isn't a negotiation, Harrison. This is an execution. Marcus Chen spent 18 months building an airtight case. He has financial records showing I've been skimming 30% off the prison budget. He has documentation of every assault you've committed. He has recordings of guards arranging fights for betting pools. He has everything. Recordings? How? Brooks pointed to the smoke detector on his ceiling. Every office, every common area, every guard station. His cousin Sarah has been installing modified surveillance equipment for 2 years. Equipment that feeds directly to an external server we can't access or destroy. We've been performing our crimes on camera without knowing it. Tank felt his world tilting. Then we're finished. You're finished, Brooks corrected coldly. I still have options. My family has connections. I'll cooperate, claim ignorance, blame everything on you and Patterson. I might keep my pension if I play this right. Tank stood abruptly. You're throwing me to the wolves. You are the wolf, Harrison. I'm just the zookeeper who didn't keep the cage locked properly. Brooks turned his chair toward the window. We're done here. Guard. Back in D Block, Tank found Marcus in the recreation yard, surprisingly playing basketball with a group of younger inmates. He moved with unexpected athletic grace, and Tank noticed something else. Several inmates were watching Marcus with respect, not fear. Protection. Tank approached slowly, hands visible and non-threatening. The yard went silent. Can we talk? Tank asked, hating how desperate he sounded. Alone. Marcus passed the basketball to Tommy Lou and walked toward the fence line, Tank following. For a long moment, neither spoke. My brother Chris, Tank finally said. Is he safe? He's fine. Working his warehouse job, completely unaware of any of this. Marcus's voice held no mockery, just fact. I'm not interested in punishing innocent people, Tank. That's the difference between us. Then what do you want from me? Marcus turned to face him directly. The truth. On record. About Daniel Reeves, about the labor program, about everything you've seen in 3 years. You testify fully, and I'll make sure the prosecutor knows you cooperated. Maybe you get transferred to minimum security, maybe you see Chris again before you're 60. Tank laughed bitterly. And if I refuse? Then you'll take the fall for everything. Brooks is already preparing to blame you. Patterson is gone. Every guard involved will claim they were following your orders. You'll die in maximum security, Tank, and your brother will spend the rest of his life wondering if his big brother was really the monster everyone said he was. The calculation was brutal but clear. Cooperate and survive, or refuse and become a scapegoat for the entire corrupt system. Why did you even come here? Tank asked quietly. You had evidence. You could have sent it to the feds from the outside. For the first time, emotion cracked through Marcus's composed exterior. Because Daniel Reeves was my nephew. My sister's only son. He came to Ironwood on a minor drug charge, supposed to be out in 18 months. Instead, he got assigned to your block, witnessed something he shouldn't have, and ended up brain dead in a hospital where he died 3 weeks later. Tank felt something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine shame. He remembered Daniel. A scared kid, barely 19, who'd seen Tank and 3 guards beating another inmate who refused to work in the illegal manufacturing operation hidden in the basement. I didn't know he was related to you, Tank whispered. Would it have mattered? Marcus's voice was steel. He was somebody's nephew. Somebody's son. Just like Chris is your brother. The only difference is I'm fighting for justice, and you've been fighting for survival by crushing everyone weaker than you. A guard's whistle blew, signaling the end of recreation time. As inmates filed back toward their blocks, Marcus placed a hand on Tank's shoulder. Not threatening, almost gentle. 48 hours. Tank. Tomorrow morning, federal agents arrive. You have until then to decide who you want to be, the monster who destroyed dozens of lives, or the man who finally did one decent thing and helped stop this nightmare from continuing. Choose wisely. That night, Tank sat in his cell writing a letter to Chris. He didn't know if he'd ever send it, didn't know if he'd ever see his brother again. But for the first time in 3 years, Donnie Harrison was thinking about something other than power and survival. He was thinking about redemption. Across the block, Marcus reviewed his files one final time. Tomorrow, everything would either work perfectly, or the corrupt system would find a way to protect itself and bury the truth forever. Justice wasn't guaranteed, but at least he'd given it a fighting chance. The federal agents arrived at 6:47 a.m., exactly when Marcus predicted. 12 vehicles rolled through Ironwood's gates with warrants that made Warden Brooks physically ill. Tank watched from his cell as agents in FBI windbreakers swarmed the administrative building. He'd made his decision at 3 a.m., finishing a 20-page confession detailing everything: the beatings, the illegal labor program, the guards who looked away, and what really happened to Daniel Reeves. Guard Morrison appeared at his cell. "Harrison, you're wanted in the warden's office. Now." The walk through the prison felt surreal. Inmates pressed against their bars, watching Tank being escorted without restraints. Word had spread that something massive was happening. In the conference room, Tank found a scene impossible to imagine 2 days earlier. Warden Brooks sat handcuffed to a chair, his expensive suit wrinkled and sweat-stained. 3 FBI agents surrounded a table covered with documents and recording equipment. Marcus Chen sat at the head, no longer in an orange jumpsuit but wearing a civilian suit, an official consultant badge clipped to his pocket. "Mr. Harrison," said Special Agent Linda Morrison, sharp-eyed and 50-ish. "I understand you have information relevant to our investigation." Tank placed his confession on the table, hands trembling. "Everything's in there. Names, dates, locations. I'll testify to all of it." Brooks lunged forward despite his restraints. "You traitorous." "Warden Brooks, one more outburst and you'll be removed," Agent Morrison said icily. She scanned the confession, her expression darkening. "This corroborates everything Mr. Chen provided. The labor program, betting rings, systematic cover-ups. There's more." Tank pulled a USB drive from his pocket. 3 years of recordings. "I started keeping insurance after Daniel Reeves died because I knew eventually someone would pin everything on me. Conversations with Brooks, Patterson, the guards. Everything." Marcus's eyes widened. This he hadn't anticipated. Brooks turned gray. "That's illegal recording. Inadmissible." "Actually, when inmate safety is compromised, it's completely admissible," Agent Morrison replied. "Especially documenting ongoing criminal conspiracy." She plugged the drive into her laptop. Tank's recordings played. Brooks's voice, unmistakable, discussing maximizing profits from the labor program. Patterson arranging for problem inmates to have accidents. Guards coordinating betting pools on fights they instigated. The final recording was most damning. Brooks and 2 board members discussing Daniel Reeves specifically. "The kid saw too much. He's scheduled to testify next month. We need him gone. Tank can handle it. He's reliable for this kind of problem. Make it look accidental. No one investigates prison falls." The recording ended. Silence except for Brooks's ragged breathing. "I didn't kill Daniel," Tank said, voice cracking. "But I didn't stop it. I watched 3 guards throw him down those stairs. I told myself it was survival, that if I interfered, they'd come after me or my brother. I've lived with that every day since." Agent Morrison nodded to her colleagues. "Warden Richard Brooks, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, fraud, and 40 other charges. Take him." As Brooks was dragged out screaming about lawyers, Marcus stood and faced Tank directly. "Thank you," Marcus said simply. "Daniel's mother will finally have answers. So will 43 other families." "I don't deserve thanks," Tank replied. "I deserve to rot." "You'll face consequences," Agent Morrison interjected. "But cooperation at this level will reflect in your sentencing review. You might see your brother again, Mr. Harrison." Over 6 hours, Ironwood was systematically dismantled. 23 guards arrested. 4 administrators taken into custody. The basement labor operation producing counterfeit electronics was documented and shut down. Inmates were interviewed individually. Those coerced into the labor program were processed for sentence review. Several, including Tommy Lou and Spiderweb, had cases flagged for early release consideration. By afternoon, news vans lined the perimeter. The story broke nationally: massive corruption ring exposed at major prison, federal agents arrest dozens. Marcus stood in the yard watching it unfold. His cousin Sarah approached, tears streaming. Daniel would be so proud, she whispered, hugging him. 2 years of planning. 18 months inside this nightmare. You did it. We did it, Marcus corrected. You risked everything installing surveillance equipment. Tommy hacked their financial systems. Spider connected us with Daniel's mother's lawyers. Even Tank chose truth over self-preservation. In processing, Tank was being prepared for transfer to federal holding pending testimony. As they led him past Marcus, he stopped. My brother Chris, Tank said. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I'm trying to be the brother he deserves, even if it's too late. Marcus nodded. I'll tell him his brother is finally doing the right thing. That's what matters. As Tank was escorted to the transport van, something unexpected happened. Several inmates began slow clapping. Not mockingly, but with genuine respect. The monster of D Block was leaving, but the man inside had finally found courage. The sun set as final arrests were made. Patterson was located in Florida and taken into custody. 3 board members arrested at their homes. The entire corrupt network profiting from suffering was exposed. Marcus stood at the prison gates, breathing free air for the first time in 18 months. His sentence was vacated, record cleared. He was no longer an inmate but a civilian consultant who'd helped expose one of the largest prison corruption cases in federal history. Agent Morrison joined him. You took an incredible risk, Mr. Chen. Going undercover without official protection, living among dangerous criminals that long. It could have ended very differently. It already ended badly once, Marcus replied, thinking of Daniel. I just made sure it couldn't end that way for anyone else. That's justice, isn't it? Not revenge, but prevention. As he walked through those gates, Marcus glanced back at Ironwood. The prison would be investigated for months, reformed or possibly shut down. Lives had been saved. A corrupt system exposed. And one bully who'd terrorized dozens learned that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous. Not because of violence, but because of something far more powerful: truth, methodically gathered and impossible to deny. 6 months later, Marcus Chen stood outside a modest house in Newark, gathering courage before knocking. The door opened before he could, revealing a young man in his early 20s, tall and lean with Tank's same jawline but softer eyes. You must be Marcus, Chris Harrison said quietly. I've been expecting you. Inside, over coffee, Marcus explained everything. Not sparing details, not softening the truth about what Tank had done, but also not omitting the final choice Tank had made when it mattered most. He's testifying again next week, Marcus said. 5th time. His testimony has already led to arrests in 3 other states. The entire corrupt prison network is collapsing because your brother decided to tell the truth. Chris stared at his coffee. I visited him last month. He looked different. Smaller somehow. But his eyes weren't empty anymore. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. He found his conscience again. That takes more courage than any act of violence. Will he ever get out? Marcus chose his words carefully. His original sentence was 25 years for manslaughter. With the additional charges from his time at Ironwood, he was looking at life. But because of his cooperation and the critical nature of his testimony, the prosecutor recommended sentence modification. He'll likely serve another 12 years in minimum security. He'll be 52 when he's released. Chris nodded slowly, processing. So I'll be in my mid-30s when I see him again. My kids will get to meet their uncle. He talks about you every time I visit, Marcus said. Says you're the only thing that kept him human all those years. Even when he was pretending to be a monster, he protected the idea of you like a lifeline. After leaving Chris's apartment, Marcus drove to Cedar Grove Cemetery. He'd made this trip every week for 6 months, rain or shine. At Daniel Reeves's headstone, he placed fresh flowers and sat on the grass. "We got them, Danny," he said softly. "All of them. Brooks got 35 years federal. Patterson got 20. 18 guards, 4 administrators, and 6 corporate executives who profited from the labor program. Your case was the key that unlocked everything." The wind rustled through the trees, and Marcus allowed himself to imagine it was his nephew's way of acknowledging. His phone buzzed. A message from Agent Morrison. "Appeals hearing tomorrow for the 40 inmates whose cases were compromised. Looks like at least 23 will get early release or sentence modifications. Your testimony was crucial. DOJ wants to discuss consulting work if you're interested." Marcus had spent 2 years of his life in hell for this outcome. 18 months inside Ironwood, living every day with the knowledge that one wrong move could get him killed. 6 months since his release, traveling constantly to testify, to provide evidence, to ensure every corrupt official faced justice. His tech company, Sentinel Analytics, had been dissolved, his reputation destroyed by the fraud charges. He'd lost his career, his savings fighting the false charges, and nearly lost his life. But sitting at Daniel's grave, Marcus knew with absolute certainty that he'd do it all again. Because 43 families had closure now. 23 inmates were getting second chances. A corrupt system had been exposed and reformed. And one violent man had found redemption by choosing truth over self-preservation. 3 weeks later, Marcus attended the congressional hearing on prison reform. Tank testified via video link from his new facility, his voice steady as he detailed the systemic failures that allowed corruption to flourish. "I was a monster," Tank said, looking directly into the camera. "I won't pretend otherwise. I hurt people. I stood by while others were hurt. I told myself it was survival, but that was a lie. It was cowardice. The bravest thing I ever did was finally admitting the truth, and I only found that courage because one man refused to be another victim." Afterward, reporters mobbed Marcus outside the congressional building. "Mr. Chen, you risked everything to expose this corruption. Was it worth it?" Marcus thought about Daniel. About the 23 men walking free. About Chris finally having hope of seeing his brother again. About the reforms being implemented in prisons across the country because of this case. "Justice isn't about revenge," Marcus said clearly. "It's about making sure the powerful can't abuse the powerless without consequences. My nephew Daniel Reeves was 19 years old when he died in that prison. He was somebody's son, somebody's nephew, somebody's friend. His life mattered. Every inmate's life matters. Was exposing the people who forgot that worth losing everything? Absolutely." "What's next for you?" another reporter called out. "I'm consulting with the Department of Justice on prison reform initiatives. We're implementing new oversight systems, independent monitoring, and whistleblower protections. What happened at Ironwood can't happen again. That's Daniel's legacy." That evening, Marcus received a handwritten letter forwarded from Tank's facility. "Marcus, I know I can't undo what I did. I can't bring Daniel back or erase the pain I caused dozens of people. But I can spend every remaining day trying to prevent others from making my mistakes. I'm teaching literacy classes here now. Helping other inmates prepare for their releases. It's not much, but it's honest work. The kind of work my mother would have been proud of before I threw everything away." Chris visited again. Brought pictures of his girlfriend. Says he's thinking about proposing. Asked if I'd give my blessing even though I won't be there for the wedding. I cried for an hour after he left. First time I've cried in 15 years. You didn't have to tell him about my cooperation. You could have let him think I was just another monster getting what I deserved. Thank you for giving me a chance to be his brother again, even from behind bars. The man you met in Ironwood's cafeteria was Tank Harrison, and Tank deserved everything coming to him. But you somehow found Donnie Harrison underneath, the person I thought I'd killed years ago. You gave him a reason to come back. That's the real justice. Not destroying monsters, but helping people remember they don't have to be monsters. Respectfully, Donnie Harrison." Marcus folded the letter carefully, adding it to the file he kept of everything related to the case. Years from now, when people studied the Ironwood scandal, they'd see the statistics, the arrests, the reforms. But this letter captured something more important, the human cost of corruption and the difficult path back to redemption. A bully hit the new inmate in the cafeteria, and seconds later, he was crying on the floor. But those tears weren't from physical pain. They were from finally facing the truth about himself and finding the courage to change. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's giving them the opportunity to become something better than what they were. Marcus had wanted justice for Daniel, and he got it. But he'd also gotten something unexpected, proof that even the worst people can choose differently when confronted with the consequences of their actions. Tank had been a monster. But Donnie Harrison was trying, one day at a time, to be a man again. That transformation, painful and incomplete as it was, represented the real victory. If this story moved you, consider subscribing to the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments about second chances and redemption. Because the most powerful form of justice isn't punishment alone, it's creating a system where people are held accountable but also given the chance to make things right. Marcus Chen walked away from the congressional building that day, knowing his nephew's death hadn't been meaningless. Daniel's tragedy had exposed a corrupt system, saved dozens of lives, and even reached one violent man who'd forgotten he was human. That was justice. Imperfect, complicated, but real. And sometimes, that's the best any of us can hope for.